The summer air over Charleston felt like punishment, the kind of heat that made a man question his choices, his God, and his debt. Samuel Rutledge stood beneath the cracked arch of Ryan's mart, sweat crawling down his back like guilt. Before him, a line of men waited to buy what no man should own: bodies, strength, silence. He told himself he came for labor, but deep down, he came for redemption, something a ledger could not balance. When the auctioneer's voice broke, when the crowd turned away from the man beneath the burlap sack, Samuel lifted his hand. $5, the lowest bid in the room. And with that motion, casual, almost ashamed, he bought a story that would poison every corner of his life. Not because of who the man was, but because of what he would reveal. The kind of truth that doesn't just haunt a man, it changes what he believes he is. If that opening made your pulse shift, stay. This isn't just history. It's the anatomy of guilt, loyalty, and the price of silence. Subscribe for more stories where truth burns hotter than hellfire and men face the ghosts they built with their own hands. Now, let's step into 1847, the year a $5 decision tore a plantation apart. The August air clawed at every breath. The harbor reeked of iron, sweat, and molasses. Men spoke in low tones, their hats pulled down, pretending their conscience wasn't watching. Samuel Rutledge adjusted his coat, though the heat made the act pointless. His ledger book pressed against his ribs like a hidden wound. He'd lost too much money that season, too many debts, too much pride. Ryan's mart loomed ahead, its whitewashed bricks reflecting the morning sun. Inside, a crowd of planters gathered, men trading humanity as if measuring grain. No laughter, just murmurs and flies. He stood apart from them, not out of virtue, but habit. He had learned long ago that men with too much to lose should speak less. Silence keeps a man safe longer than prayer. The auctioneer's hammer cracked through the air like judgment. One man sold, another bought. Flesh became numbers, and numbers made peace with sin. Samuel felt each strike like a heartbeat. He wasn't here for spectacle. He needed a worker, cheap and strong. His overseer, Prio, had warned him, "Spend what you must. Weak labor ruins a season." But there was no money left to spend. He watched the older men bargain for strength. Bids rose and fell. A field hand fetched $200. Another went for $900. Samuel's stomach twisted. That kind of money belonged to men with fortune and heirs. Then came the last listing. Number 47. A man with his head covered in burlap, shoulders broad, posture unmoving. The auctioneer's tone changed, a hint of unease in his throat. "This one," he said, "requires discretion, strong back, sound mind, kept isolated due to temperament. Starting bid, $10. The crowd chuckled, a cruel kind of laughter. Someone shouted, "What's wrong with him?" Another man muttered, "Madness or disease. No man worth hiding unless something's broke inside him." Samuel felt a tremor in the air. Curiosity, not fear. The bidding faltered. 10, 9, 8. The silence grew heavy. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his lip, glancing toward the man who wouldn't move. $5, he said. "Do I have 5? Samuel's hand lifted before his mind caught up, his voice dry as dust. Sold. The hammer struck once, sealing a decision that would devour years of his life. Prio stared at him from across the yard, disbelief etched on his face. $5, the lowest bid of the day. The crowd shifted, whispering. Samuel didn't care, not yet. He signed the papers with a trembling hand. When the burlapped figure was brought to him, Samuel noticed the man's posture. Steady, calm. Not beaten, not broken. Simply waiting. "Name?" Samuel asked. No answer, just the faint sound of breath beneath the cloth. The overseer spoke up. "Maybe can't talk." Samuel frowned. "Then he'll learn to listen." The road home shimmered under the heat. The wagon creaked as Samuel drove, the man sitting silent in the back, head bowed. Dust rose behind them, like ghosts refusing burial. Prio rode alongside on horseback, muttering curses. $5, sir? For a man we can't see or speak to? You bought a riddle. Samuel didn't reply. He hated riddles. By dusk, the plantation came into view. Magnolia Bend, 800 acres of rice and rot. The house looked proud from afar, but up close it sagged with memory and mildew. He brought the man to the quarters, told Prio to assign him to field duty. Keep him working. Don't let him near the house. The overseer nodded, suspicion dark in his eyes. That night, Samuel sat at his desk, bourbon untouched. The ink bled across his ledger. He wrote a single line before the candle guttered, "I bid because no one else would." Sleep found him in fragments. He dreamed of faces covered in burlap, of men with no eyes, of his father saying, "A man's mercy costs more than his cruelty." He woke drenched in guilt. Days passed. The man worked without complaint, never spoke, never removed the cloth. Others called him the ghost. Samuel watched from a distance, noticing precision in his labor, the absence of fear. Once, at dusk, Samuel rode by the field and saw him standing knee-deep in mud, staring toward the horizon. The stillness unnerved him, not emptiness, but thought. Later in his journal, Samuel wrote, "He watches like a man who remembers what freedom feels like." He hated himself for understanding it. A week later, an accident. One of the younger workers collapsed from heat. The silent man carried him to shade, fetched water, revived him. No order given, just instinct. Prio reported it that night. "The mute's got sense," he said. "Might be trouble later. Smart men don't stay quiet forever." Samuel didn't answer. He already knew that truth too well. The next morning, Samuel found a mark carved into the post outside the barn. A single symbol, a circle split down the center, not made by blade, but burned, fresh. He asked Prio who'd done it. The overseer swore ignorance. But Samuel noticed the man's hands, calloused, burned in the shape of that same mark. His silence wasn't submission. It was warning. That night, thunder rolled in from the sea. Rain lashed the windows. Samuel dreamed again, the same faceless figure whispering through burlap, "You bought more than you can afford." He woke before dawn, heart hammering. The wind howled through the shutters, carrying the smell of the fields. Mud, salt, and something faintly metallic, like blood on iron. When the sun rose, the man was gone from his quarters. Prio searched the fields. No trace. Only footprints leading to the riverbank, and beside them, that same burned symbol in the mud. By evening, he returned. Quiet as before. No explanation offered, no defiance shown. Samuel didn't question him. Some answers a man isn't ready to hear. The next day, a calf was found dead in the pasture. Eyes open, throat cleanly cut. No sign of struggle, just stillness. The same circle mark burned into the fence post. Prio spat in the dirt. "He's cursed, sir. Sell him before he sells us to the devil." Samuel's jaw tightened. "We're already sold." That night, the man came to the veranda and stood beneath the lantern's light. The burlap mask lifted slightly, a voice low and measured. "Do you want truth or comfort?" Samuel's blood turned to ice. He said nothing. The man nodded once. "Then you've chosen comfort." He turned and vanished into the dark, leaving Samuel alone with the sound of rain and his own pulse. And that was the first night Samuel realized the man he'd bought wasn't silent. He was simply waiting for the world to deserve his words. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt wet with secrets. Magnolia Bend breathed like a man after confession, heavy, relieved and terrified of what came next. Samuel woke before dawn. The fields were still, the river swollen. Prio's voice echoed from the stables, shouting orders to men who no longer needed them. The rhythm of obedience was cracking. The silent man, the one they now called Jonah, worked alone near the flooded terrace. No one went near him. Even the animals avoided his path. Fear is efficient. It keeps order. That morning, one of the houseboys collapsed near the smokehouse, foaming mouth, trembling limbs. The doctor blamed heat stroke. Jonah blamed something older. Poison doesn't just kill, it remembers. Samuel found Jonah waiting by the well, hands blackened with mud. "You let them drink from it," he said softly. "You didn't ask what was in the ground." Samuel felt a chill that reason couldn't explain. The water shimmered strangely under the sun. A metallic taste lingered on Samuel's tongue after one sip. He spat, tasting copper and guilt. Jonah watched him with eyes that saw more than they should. Later, Prio returned with news. 2 more men sick, skin pale, lips blue. The overseer swore someone was tampering with the supplies. Samuel knew better. The rot was in the soil, not the sacks. That night, thunder again. The storm's rhythm matched his heartbeat. Jonah stood outside the main house, bare-chested, rain running down his shoulders like ink. "The land's bleeding," he said. "You just can't see it yet." Samuel wanted to strike him, to end the riddle. Instead, he walked back inside, poured bourbon, and stared at his reflection until it blurred. Every man lies to himself long before he lies to others. Prio came later, drunk and shaking. "It's him," he hissed. "That man's cursed. The sick ones all work near him. He looks at a thing and it spoils." Samuel said nothing. Fear made Prio predictable. The next morning, Samuel found claw marks on the door to the pantry, 3 long grooves, too deep for any blade. Inside, the barrels smelled of iron. Jonah stood nearby, silent, his hands clean. "Who did this?" Samuel asked. Jonah didn't answer. Instead, he knelt and pressed his palm to the ground. "The house is sick," he murmured. "You built it on bones." Samuel wanted to deny it, but couldn't. That afternoon, another man fell ill. The cook, old Grady. His voice slurred, eyes glassed over. Jonah forced salt water down his throat until he vomited black bile. Grady lived barely. Samuel's gratitude turned sour when he saw Jonah smile. Not cruelly, but knowingly, as if saving one man proved a point. "It's starting," Jonah said. "Whatever you buried is waking." Magnolia Bend began to feel haunted without a ghost. Lamps flickered. Animals screamed at nothing. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. Samuel found himself writing in his journal again, though the words came like confessions. He wrote, "The man I bought for $5 now runs my conscience. I am the overseer of my own decay." When he closed the book, he swore he heard breathing that wasn't his own. Prio's suspicion grew meaner. He cornered Jonah behind the stables, fists clenched. "What are you?" he demanded. Jonah just stared, eyes calm. "A reminder," he said. Prio's hand twitched, then fell. "You don't hit mirrors." That night, Samuel dreamt of the river rising, swallowing the plantation whole. He saw Jonah standing atop the water untouched, watching as everything Samuel owned sank beneath him. He woke to real screams. Prio's quarters were on fire. By the time they dragged him out, the overseer was half mad, muttering of voices beneath the floorboards. "They're coming," he gasped. "For what we took." The doctor blamed fever again. Samuel blamed nothing. Jonah said, "Truth burns hotter than fire." Prio died by morning, and Samuel realized the plantation had begun its own reckoning. Jonah worked through the burial. Rain poured over the graves like mercy denied. When the last shovelful fell, Jonah looked at Samuel and said, "Every man buries himself twice, once in life, once in memory." After that, Samuel couldn't sleep indoors. He began spending nights on the porch, listening to the house creak as if whispering apologies. Jonah's presence felt like gravity, unseen, inescapable, true. Then came the night of the lantern. Samuel found it burning in the field, set neatly atop a wooden box. Inside lay an old revolver, cleaned, polished, untouched by time. Jonah's voice came from the dark. "It's yours." Samuel froze. "Why?" Jonah's reply floated like smoke. "Because one day you'll need to decide what kind of man you really are. The kind who kills or the kind who confesses." The plantation men began leaving one by one, vanishing without farewell. By week's end, only 6 remained. The river stank of rot. The well ran red for an hour before clearing again. Samuel stopped drinking, stopped praying. He started listening, to wind, to wood, to the silence between raindrops. Jonah had infected him with awareness. That was the truest kind of poison. One evening he caught Jonah by the river, shirt off, eyes closed, humming low. The sound wasn't a song. It was memory turned to sound. Samuel felt something shift in his chest, fear mixed with awe. "Who are you really?" he asked. Jonah opened his eyes. "The last man who remembers why you built this house." The words hit harder than thunder. Samuel felt the ground tilt beneath him. That night he read his father's old journal, entries about buying land cheap after a flood had washed away graves, the same graves Jonah had warned about, the same bones beneath his house. Jonah approached, silent as ever. "It's begun," he said. "Once a man knows the truth, he can't keep pretending. Poison's only purpose is to reveal." Samuel nodded. He finally understood. The plantation wasn't dying, it was remembering. Every debt Samuel's blood had ignored was crawling back to collect. The house groaned once, and the sound was almost human. Jonah turned toward the river, where mist curled like breath. "When the past rises," he said, "a man either drowns or learns to stand on water." Samuel stared after him, realizing which fate was his. And from that moment forward, Magnolia Bend stopped belonging to the living. It belonged to the men who remembered what they'd buried, and to the one man who refused to stay silent any longer. The fog came from the river before sunrise, swallowing the trees and erasing the horizon. It wasn't weather, it was memory returning, a slow ghost creeping over everything men tried to forget. Samuel stood on the veranda, coat open, coffee cold. Jonah was already in the fields, his figure a dark cut against the white mist. Watching him was like staring into a sermon made flesh. The other men no longer spoke his name. They called him the Shadow. They whispered that he could look at a man and make him see himself. No curse is heavier than recognition. By mid-morning, Samuel noticed something strange. Jonah's reflection didn't appear in the water barrel. The surface showed only sky and Samuel's own trembling face. He looked away before the truth-formed words. Prio's grave had begun to sink. Rain pooled inside it like an eye refusing to close. Samuel shoveled dirt to fill it again, but each morning the hole returned, deeper, wider. Jonah started humming again that night, a sound like a prayer broken in half. The tune echoed through the hallways, bending the silence until even the rats stopped moving. The remaining field hands avoided the main house. They worked in silence, eyes down. Fear had become the overseer now, steady and fair. Every lash belonged to the conscience. At supper, Samuel heard footsteps upstairs, though no one lived above him anymore. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate. He rose, candle in hand, and climbed, each stair groaning under the weight of dread. The hallway smelled of smoke and iron. At the far end stood Jonah, bare-chested, facing the wall. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning. Samuel's throat tightened. "This is my house." Jonah finally looked back. His eyes were different, not glowing, not supernatural, just filled with something unbearable. "Then tell me," he said softly, "why it recognizes me instead of you." Samuel dropped the candle. Flame met dust. The floor hissed. Jonah moved faster than a thought, stamping it out. "You still don't understand what I am," he whispered. "You never asked what you bought." Samuel's jaw locked. Then tell me. Jonah smiled without humor. I show men who they are, that's all. Some see monsters, some see martyrs. Most see strangers wearing their own faces. The room tilted. Samuel felt the edges of the world loosen. And what do I see? Jonah's expression softened. A man praying to forget the sins he still enjoys. The next morning, the mirror in Samuel's study was cracked clean through the center. He hadn't touched it. He didn't need to. The reflection had already confessed what the mind denied. Outside, fog thickened again. Jonah walked the fields like a priest in his parish, silent, patient, inevitable. Wherever he passed, the air shimmered as if bending under invisible heat. Samuel watched from the veranda, feeling the same mix of awe and resentment he once felt toward his own father. Respect and rage often share the same pulse. By noon, one of the younger men fled the plantation, claiming Jonah had looked at him and stolen his face. The others didn't chase him. They didn't need another ghost. That evening, Samuel found Jonah in the barn sharpening an old blade. "What are you planning?" he asked. Jonah didn't stop moving. Reflection's a cruel teacher. Some men only learn through blood. Samuel's anger rose. "You talk in riddles like a prophet drunk on his own voice." Jonah set the blade down gently. "No prophet here. Just a man tired of pretending sin has a language." Lightning split the horizon. For a moment, Jonah's face seemed to shift. Not change, but ripple, as if another version waited just beneath the skin. Samuel's breath caught. The illusion vanished. That night, he couldn't sleep. The rain returned, tapping the roof like slow applause. He dreamt of his own face melting into Jonah's, of 1,000 eyes staring from a single mirror. When he woke, Jonah was sitting at the foot of his bed, calm, composed. "You dream loud," he said. "Maybe you're ready now." Samuel couldn't speak. Fear had learned his tongue. Jonah reached for the candle and lit it. "Look," he said, pointing toward the window pane. Samuel turned and saw his reflection smiling, though his mouth did not move. The smile widened until the glass cracked. Samuel stumbled back, gasping. Jonah only watched. "That's the face the world sees," he murmured. "The man who hides behind justice and calls it mercy." By morning, Samuel's hair had begun to gray at the temples. He felt years older. Truth does that. It bends time inside a man until memory feels heavier than bone. Jonah spent the day fixing fences, whistling. The men followed him without orders. Work went smoother. Fear had turned to reverence. Samuel realized control didn't need chains. It needed conviction. That evening they buried another worker. Natural causes, they said. But the man's eyes were open, and his lips twisted in a smile too wide for peace. Jonah closed them gently before the dirt fell. After the burial, Jonah said, "The land's almost clean now." Samuel frowned. "Clean?" Jonah nodded. "Every sin leaves residue. The soil remembers the hands that bled it. I'm just showing it the truth." Samuel's voice broke. "You're not God." Jonah's gaze didn't waver. "Neither are you. That's why we're still breathing." The words hung in the air like ash refusing to fall. The fog lifted at last, revealing the river like a scar across the earth. Jonah stood at its edge, coat billowing, whispering something the wind refused to carry. Samuel approached quietly. "What happens now?" Jonah turned, eyes calm. "Now the house sees clearly, and so do you." He stepped into the water, its surface barely rippling beneath him. For a moment, Samuel thought he saw his own reflection walking beside Jonah, not following, not leading, just equal in guilt. Then both figures dissolved into the current. The plantation exhaled. The air felt lighter, but inside Samuel, something heavy remained. The weight of knowing that truth never leaves, it only changes its face. The morning came red. Not sunrise, but warning. The river steamed as if boiling from beneath, and the house groaned like an animal waking from a nightmare it never escaped. Samuel walked barefoot through the dew, his body hollow but alive. The silence was louder now, shaped by things no man could name. Magnolia Bend was breathing through him. Jonah was gone. Only footprints remained in the mud, leading nowhere, fading where grass began. Samuel followed until he reached the riverbank and saw the ashes of a fire still whispering. In the ashes lay symbols carved into stone, circles intersecting circles, a language older than prayer. He touched one, and it burned cold. Truth always arrives wearing contradiction. Back at the house, the mirrors were gone. Every pane of glass shattered during the night. The servants claimed they heard laughter, but Samuel knew better. Guilt has its own sense of humor. He sat in his study, the ledger open, pen dry. The columns of debt and harvest blurred into scripture. Each number was a confession written in arithmetic. He began to understand Jonah's sermons. Outside, thunder rumbled. Not storm thunder, but something closer, heavier, the sound of land shifting under the weight of its own memory. The house trembled as if bracing for judgment. Samuel poured bourbon, though he hadn't tasted comfort in weeks. "To debts unpaid," he whispered. The drink went down like molten glass. Pain has flavor when a man deserves it. The door creaked open. Jonah stood there, drenched but calm. "You called," he said simply. Samuel nodded once. "I didn't speak." Jonah smiled. "You didn't need to. The guilty never have to call loudly." They faced each other like brothers who shared the same wound. "Why did you come back?" Samuel asked. Jonah stepped closer, the lamplight turning his skin bronze and unreal. "Because you're ready." "Ready for what?" Jonah's gaze didn't waver. "For your bargain." Samuel laughed once, sharp and dry. "I've made enough bargains to damn a parish." Jonah shook his head. "Not like this one." He placed a folded paper on the desk. Samuel opened it, a deed written in Jonah's hand, transferring Magnolia Bend to the memory of its dead. No man's name, just history itself. "I want you to sign," Jonah said. "Give the land back to what it remembers. In return, it will stop whispering your name at night." Samuel's hands trembled. Freedom was always offered at a cost. He looked up. "And what happens to me?" Jonah's voice softened. "You live, but not as owner, as witness." Samuel swallowed the word like a confession. Witness, a man punished by knowledge. The clock struck noon, though the sky remained dark. Samuel signed. The ink bled quickly, like veins opening. Jonah nodded once. "Now the land knows you finally heard it." A sound rose from beneath the floorboards. Not wind, not rain, the collective exhale of things long buried. The house shook once, then fell silent. The storm outside died instantly. Samuel stood, his heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the quiet. Jonah turned toward the open doorway. "It's done," he said. "Now the world remembers its own crimes." He walked toward the yard, the light dimming as he moved. Samuel followed, each step heavy with realization. Redemption is not freedom. It's endurance. At the edge of the river, Jonah stopped. "You think I came to destroy," he said. "But destruction is mercy when truth's the alternative." He smiled, the kind of smile that forgives nothing. Samuel felt his knees weaken. "Who are you?" Jonah looked past him, toward the plantation. The echo of every man who saw wrong and stayed silent. His words fell like ashes. The river shone silver now, clear and cruel. Jonah waded in, stopping waist deep. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them what silence costs." Then he stepped forward and vanished beneath the surface. Samuel waited, staring at the ripples until they stilled. Only the faint scent of smoke remained, the last trace of a man who'd never truly belonged to the world. That night, the fields glowed faintly under the moon, green shoots pushing through poisoned soil. Renewal never asks permission. It simply returns when men are done lying. Samuel wrote again. He wasn't a curse. He was a mirror, and I was too cowardly to look until he left. The ink dried slow, heavy as regret. He sold nothing, rebuilt nothing. The plantation became a skeleton draped in silence. Travelers who passed swore they saw lights moving through the rice fields, torches or ghosts. None could say. Years blurred. The Civil War came and went. Men changed uniforms, but not sins. Samuel lived long enough to see freedom declared, though the air still smelled of chains. One winter night, he returned to the river old and shaking. The moon hung low, the same color as bone. He whispered Jonah's name once, and the water rippled back in reply. He smiled then, the first real smile in decades. The bargain held, he said softly. Fire took what it must. Light kept what it could. His voice faded into wind. When morning came, only his footprints remained at the river's edge, circling once, then vanishing into the mist. The house behind him stood hollow but at peace. In time, men forgot the name Magnolia Bend. But the land remembered. And when storms rolled in from the coast, lightning always struck the same tree, the one near the river where the truth began. And in that flash, for the briefest instant, two figures appeared on the water's surface, one young, one old, both unafraid. Then the light faded, leaving only reflection and silence.